and I have a surprise presenter as well. One of the best parts about my job is I get to work with some amazing people, and one of them was kind enough to join me today, and I asked her if she'd be willing to also present, because I never get to present with a native of the city where I'm presenting. So Sarah Lynn Fisher will also be presenting, and she is the digital collections librarian now at University of North Texas Libraries. She had been in my unit, in the newspaper unit, before that, leading the National Digital Newspaper Program Texas Project, as well as working on the Gateway to Oklahoma History Metadata, leading that initiative. So if you have family in Oklahoma, I will be talking about Oklahoma newspapers as well a little bit. To get started, I'll walk you through what the Texas Digital Newspaper Program is. We have over 11.2 million pages of newspapers. Texas has a uniquely vast publishing history, and it goes to strange dates. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the fact that it's so large, the titles we have are over 2,500 titles. To give you an idea, most states who are not California, New York, or Texas have between 100 and 200 newspaper titles in their entire history, covering 200 to 300 years. In Texas, 11.2 million pages. We are the largest single state open access interface to digital newspapers in the country. The Library of Congress's Chronicling America, also a free and open access database, is the only open access repository that beats us in the US, but they cheat because they have all 50 states, the Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. They're also a very valuable resource to which we contribute. But this is massive. Now, I mentioned dates. Anybody, don't be shy, feel free to yell it out. What's strange that I say that this spans from 1813 to the present for Texas newspapers? It was not a state. It was a part of Spain, and we have digitized newspapers from 1813 that are covering the revolution of Mexico from Spain, specifically covering wars that or battles that happened around San Antonio. And I'll show you some of that later. But Texas publishing history is rich, and it is just so much fun to work with. If you're interested in working with the Portal of Texas History, this is the address. Feel free to take a picture of that URL. You don't need a login, you don't need a password, it is completely free. This is run by University of North Texas Libraries. We're a library, so we believe in open access to information. Now for the Allen American, Tom probably told you a much better story and gave you more information, much more detail than I'm going to be able to tell you, because I learned about this from Sarah Lynn Fisher, whose mother had contacted her, reached out and said, we have all these newspapers. And there were pictures, and we knew that they needed to find a home for the newspapers and something to do with them, and we said, okay, we can do it. So Sarah Lynn went with another colleague of ours, Mark Phillips, here and picked up the newspapers and brought them back so we could work on them. And as a result, we've been able to preserve over 50 years of the Allen history, of the Allen American. And also Deborah Arledge. Deborah Arledge is here tonight, I believe, in the back. Yes, hello, Deborah. It's good to see you, too. I communicated with both Deborah and Jeannie about getting these newspaper collections and getting them preserved. And then I worked a lot with Tom on preparing grant applications. And these newspapers were funded through the Texas State Library and Archives Commission through something called a Text Treasures Grant. And I want to say, Tom claims that I helped him a lot. Tom did not need a lot of help for these applications. He prepared for 3 years in a row grant applications spanning between $25,000 and, 15,000 and 25,000, 3 years in a row. That is a significant amount of money for how much he was able to, how much work he could put into it, how much we were able to get done. So realistically, I want to thank Tom for all his work on those grant applications too. And these awards are funded through the Institute of Museum and Library Services, through a Library Services Technology Act, And those are grants awarded to the state of Texas, who awards them through a competitive grant program called the Texas Treasures Program. So what's this collection look like? Tom mentioned that these newspapers are getting use. We have 2237 total items, and on the portal of Texas History, those are issues. One item is one issue. And those 2237 issues have received over 24,000 uses. Now, on the portal Texas History, when we measure uses, we're measuring individual 30-minute interactions with the item, not people bouncing to a page and bouncing back. These are actually somebody sitting down, working with a newspaper item. So when Tom mentions these have received a lot of use, this is over 1,000% usage, which is just amazing to me because this collection is still being built. We're in the midst of adding the last few years from microfilm. All right, so what are these newspapers? Where do these all come from? We work with public libraries for the most part, but also often with museums, universities, genealogical societies, private collectors. Our goal and our mission is to digitally preserve any Texas newspaper and make it freely available on the portal Texas History. So if you have a newspaper, or if you know of anybody who has a newspaper, if you have a cousin who lives in Derazette, Texas, or an aunt who lives down in Brownsville, Texas, please tell them to give me a call if they have newspaper content, because we want those newspapers. Our goal is to preserve Texas history through these newspapers. We work with multiple granting agencies. These include the Talker Foundation, who supports populations under 12,000 or county public libraries in Texas. That covers a lot of ground. We also work with the Hancher Foundation, which supports populations under 50,000, as well as the Texas Treasures Program, which the Allen Public Library received 3 years in a row. All right, so what do we take in? We bring newspapers in from microfilm, and we will be adding some microfilm issues from the 1970s for the Allen American soon. And we use a scanning machine that is designed to quickly vacuum up the images, and then we process them and make them available. We also scan from physical page, which is the bulk of the Allen newspaper collection. And we also digitally preserve PDF editions. And I want to say on the Allen American, those were possibly the longest issues, notably the longest newspaper issues of any newspaper we've ever done. We made a joke that we scanned 10,000 pages in 3 issues because there were just so many pages per issue, which means there's a lot of content, so rich, such rich history documented in those pages. But I also want to mention, we have newspapers from across Texas. These are just a few examples. If you're conducting research, you can tie your research together. You can find one mention of, say, a family member or historical event in the Allen newspaper, but you might locate it earlier on, that historical event discussed, in a different newspaper title. We are also in the midst of adding new titles in further years. We'll be digitizing the entire run of the Plano Star-Courier pretty soon. They've just received a grant. We have multiple area newspapers, including the Wiley News and the Saxe Sentinel, and you can tie those stories together with earlier years of, for instance, the Wiley newspaper or other Collin County newspapers. We have multiple years of the McKinney Examiner and the McKinney Gazette. So and we'll show you how to do that, but it's really helpful because everything is fully text searchable. So now, this 1813 to the present, I kind of skipped over, or I already kind of previewed that. Texas was an estate, and we received from a private collector a phone call saying, I have newspapers from 1813 of the National Intelligencer, and they cover the revolution from Spain. Would you be interested in scanning these if I loan them to you? And I talked to everybody about it after he called, and I said, yes, we would. And it was amazing to work with. Here's a picture of it, but I will show you in just a moment another page close up. But I do want to mention, before I show that to you, because this page just contains some graphic information, I won't read this to you, but newspapers do, I'll just warn you, newspapers do contain words we don't use anymore. They discuss historical events in their historical context. We do not redact the content, but be prepared that there might be words or ideas or events discussed that you would not encounter in a newspaper today. And just be aware, we do provide access to thousands of pages of items, and we do not censor this, but we do want you to be aware. So that newspaper, this is the same page that I just showed you, contained details, as I mentioned, of battles taking place in San Antonio, of Spain invading. San Antonio was a major base and had been invaded, and there are complete stories told of the families, the people affected, driving themselves out of San Antonio to escape the Spanish soldiers. If you want to look up the earliest newspaper issues in this history, look up both San Antonio as well as Saint, St. Antonio, and you will find early stories about what was going on. The National Intelligencer was published in Washington, D.C., covering the events happening in Texas because they wanted to pay attention and knew that Texas was a neighboring area that might need support and might be important. And then also, you can find stories from your own past. Dr. Davis, I'm not related to her. I live in her house. It's my house now. She called her cousins and said, I'm going to go move into a nursing home. I want you to sell the house. It's all yours. She passed away in the nursing home. Later on, I bought the house. So will tell people for the realty's sake, she didn't pass away in the house. But I think of her all the time because I wrote my dissertation in that house, and she told the neighbors, call me Dr. Davis. It's Dr. Davis. Now I don't tell my neighbors that. I tell people, you're not my student. Please don't call me Dr. Kramer. But I do love researching this house because Dr. Davis was a very prominent woman in Denton, Texas. She was an interim provost at Texas Women's University, was the dean of the sociology college for years and years at Texas Women's until she retired. And she was truly one of the founding women who gave Texas Women's University its reputation. And as you can see in yellow, I have found her name highlighted in multiple newspapers. And when you search on the portal, it'll bring up full text results of everything that contains that search term, and I'll show you how to do that in a moment. And Dr. Davis was a potter. She had a potting shed in the back of what is my house now. I had to tear that down because it was falling in, but I know exactly where she was when this picture was taken because she worked on arts and crafts and pottery both at the Civic Center as well as at the house. And I found clay pots at my house that she made, just periodically looking through cabinets and looking at materials. And then I found a beautiful picture of Dr. Davis, who's the woman right in the front with the cane, along with the woman after whom the Texas Women's University Library is named after, Ms. Blagg-Huey, or Dr. Blagg-Huey. And these names, if you ever walk on Texas Women's University campus, are founders of the university. So I feel honored and amazed and so privileged that I'm able to live in the house that she left such an imprint on. And I will find things about it. For instance, if you pull into the driveway, she had deer sculptures next to the garage. And when you pull into the driveway, she has visual puns. It's a deer in headlights if you drive in at night. And I laugh every time and smile. And my dad appreciated it. He saw these things right when I moved in because he loved visual humor. And he'd always point out, oh, she did this. Yes. Of course, when I bought the house, he said, it's squirrely, just like you. Now, for Allen history, I have found a few things that I've been fascinated by, and Sarah-Lynn would tell me, I asked her yesterday, I mentioned one of them, and she said, oh yeah, that was the big history event until other things happened. So I was curious about Ebenezer Allen, which I mentioned to Ed. I mentioned that a minute ago, and I was curious just about the old depot building because I didn't know the Guild is in a new depot building, But the original Depot building is in a frame store. And then also, this led me down a path, which happens when you work on the Portal Texas History, that Sam Bass robbed one of the trains. And I was very interested to learn about that. Now, these newspapers that you see that are from physical page in full color are from the 1970s, talking about the history of Sam Bass. But looking on the Portal Texas History, I also found information about Sam Bass robbing the Allen trains through the Denison Daily News, also and the Fort Worth Democrat, multiple newspapers, but that talk about then later on the Sam Bass trials and what happened and different convictions that took place. You can tie these materials together very easily, which is what I had done with Dr. Davis's house as well. And now Sarah Lynn is going to come up. Sarah Lynn Fisher will join us, and she's going to talk about conducting research as a local person who knows the history.
Hello, as Anna mentioned, my name is Sarah Lynn Fisher. I am a digital collections librarian at the University of North Texas Libraries, and I've been working with digital collections there for over 15 years. I've been involved with the projects in the portal, and it's just such an amazing place to work. And this project has been I've been very interested in this project, obviously from the very beginning, because I grew up in Allen, and my parents moved here in 1980, and I recently looked at a timeline of Allen history and saw that the government of Allen wasn't really incorporated until 1979, the formal government for the city hall and everything. So the period that I grew up in Allen, the town just changed so much, and the newspapers that we have collected, even though they might seem like more recent history, when you think about conducting history research, looking at the train robberies and the old history that Anna's talked about, it was really fascinating. But I also think it's very moving and very important to find your own local or more recent family history, and that's what this collection of the Allen American really provides. I'll go into that more in a minute. But I wanted to mention how the different ways that you can access the collection on the portal to Texas History. On the portal, we have collections, what we call collections, which are items that are grouped together digitally. And the main advantage to that is we have a landing page for that collection. And this is the landing page for the Allen American collection. And you can see the URL there at the bottom. So it's easy to get right to the area that you're wanting to search. And you can search from the main page, but if you're wanting to have a more focused search for just this particular collection, you can go to this page. And our collections pages have descriptions of the collections and also usually an icon that will visually kind of represent the collection. Now, when we created this icon, it has one of the newer issues because we do have some newer issues that came from the Texas Press Association e-prints that we collect from them. So in addition to the scanned newspapers, we have some of those issues, I believe, from 2011 and 2012. And also another way that we organize items on the portal are, especially if they're serial titles like newspapers, we have a title page for that particular newspaper because sometimes collections can have more than one title. And here we have the title page for the Allen American that has some important information about, when this title began, because if you've ever done a lot of research with newspapers, sometimes the titles can change over time and with different people owning the newspaper, and this is our way of kind of organizing and showing how we've identified when this title starts and ends. So, and also we provide information about who provided this collection to the portal and how many pages that we have and the dates that we have. We also invite people to send us feedback about this collection. One of the other jobs that I do as a librarian is I get to read all of the messages that people send in about the items that they are using on the portal and all the interesting questions that they ask. We recently had somebody asking us about the Allen American and saying, why don't you have 1975? Where is 1975? Well, it's coming. We're scanning the microfilm. So we are still building the collection. And if you ever come across any issues of newspapers that we have, we'd be more than interested to hear from you, to send us a message. A lot of times people, clean out offices, clean out attics, and they find things and say, oh, this might be interesting. And instead of throwing away, we allow people, we work with people to have them donate to our archive, because they can sometimes be the only copies that might be available. So it's important to preserve those. And the story that Tom told about having to, at the last minute, go collect the newspapers and wonder where to put them is one that we hear over and over. I know Anna she might tell this story later about a newspaper publisher in Galveston or in that area that was saying, oh, you should come get these newspapers before there's a hurricane. And she was able to get them before their office was destroyed by a weather event. So we do love to hear from people, so please send us your questions and your feedback. So within the collection, this is, as of today, just showing you just a more detailed view of the number of issues that we have. And then also you can view, because we have everything organized by date, the decades that we have in this collection. And you'll notice that the 1980s and the 1990s are heavily represented. So that's why I have a particular interest in this collection, because that was the time that I was living in Allen. And it was also... that was a period of when Allen was really growing as a city. I remember when Allen had one stoplight on Greenville and Main Street, and now that's kind of unthinkable, right? So just the population explosion, this is really represented in the newspaper, just to show how the town has grown and changed. And I feel like this collection is a great encapsulation of that growth and chronicling of that history. So just when looking at your own local history, we've heard several stories from Tom and Anna about how moving it is to actually see things in print, like searching for members of your family. Like, this is my mom on the front page of the Allen American. When Allen was such a small town, they would go to the schools anytime there was an event in the school. This is a picture, my sister is in this picture because her elementary school, anyone who won a citizenship award or was in the band or had a choir concert, there was always a picture, or they would go and interview students in the schools. The newspaper just was so integral to the community at that time. And, before everything was online, and for people who grew up during this period when everything wasn't documented online, it's really interesting to go back and see all of these clips from the newspaper. And I had so many interesting experiences looking through the Allen American. I was always sending clips, links to my family and to Anna, saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I found this." And just reading this one column, there was a lifestyles column. I guess Laverne Hart wrote her lifestyles column, and I just kind of news items from around the town. And there's a picture of Henry from Brookshire's. Everybody knew Henry at Brookshire's. When there was one grocery store here, he was very integral. And this is a picture. He had a birthday, and they were celebrating Henry's birthday, and it was in the newspaper. And I also noticed that I know this person on the left. She was a friend of my mom's. So just looking through every single article, there's always something interesting to find. And I also wanted to highlight, this is a picture of my mom with Elsie Summers, who was a historian in the town and wrote a history of Allen. I think his book was called Texas Takes, if you haven't read it. I remember a quote that he was in the newspaper. He said, when an older person dies, it's like a library burning down because of all of their memories that go with them. So it was so moving to see his picture in the newspaper, and also I got to see pictures of my first grade classmate who passed away in first grade from cancer, and I saw how the community came together to support her. There were multiple issues talking about events that were raising money for funding her treatment, and as a child growing up at that time, I wasn't really sure about what was actually happening, but I was able to see through the newspaper and see pictures of her that I hadn't seen in 30 years. So that was very important to me to see in this collection. But I also wanted to talk about, even though this collection doesn't cover older Allen history, there's lots of articles that are discussing the history of Allen. And there's an article called Between the Creeks by Gwendolyn Pettit that's in the newspaper that talks about different events in Allen history. And we also have on the portal a compilation of those articles as well, even from issues that we don't have on the portal. So that's a really interesting resource for Allen history as well. And also there's a lot of interesting library history. There was a librarian report for many years in the weekly paper, and I found one from, I believe it was 1972, with a librarian writing about how one person came to story time and 66 books were checked out that month. And when the library was in the old house, the Blue House, I guess is what it's called. But that was just really interesting to read about. And they had a home service where they would come to your house and they would bring you a selection of books to check out if you couldn't make it to the library. And there was also chronicling lots of pictures about when the older library building that's now the Police and Courts building that I remember going to every week, when that was built and when that opened. So there's a lot of great history of the Allen Public Library in this collection as well. And I can't end this presentation without mentioning an event that was pivotal in my young imagination when the Kingsaver burned down. The Kingsaver was a grocery store that was located, I guess, across from where the depot was, and in 1983, it burned down, and I was apparently devastated. And I was teased about it for years, but I didn't have any memory of it until I was so young at the time, but I was actually able to see pictures and read articles about the Kingsaver, and this is also an excerpt that Anna showed earlier about the depot. So there's just so much information in here, and I really invite you to continue to do research and let us know what you find and what questions you have. So thank you.
I have to say, I am from a city whose newspaper probably just won't sign off on permission ever. And I grew up in that city. And hearing Sarah Lynn talk, I'm always, once she'll talk in the office too about it, I'm just like, oh, that is so cool that you get to see these online and get to work with them. And I'm also my family is from Pennsylvania, so they don't have a portal to Pennsylvania history the way we have the portal to Texas history. So it's not quite as easy to do the research as it is here. So these are just a few tips when you are conducting research. For instance, these were just Denton things that you can practice with while I'm here, or if you want to take pictures, please do. Place everything that you are searching for. If you have multiple word search terms, for instance, a first and last name, or a city, event, or place, look it up in quotation marks on the Portal Texas History in that search feature, and you will find it. I found quite a lot when I searched for Allen Public Library Celebration in quotation marks, and a lot of relevant information. On the left-hand columns of the Portal Texas History, you will find all kinds of ways just to narrow down your search. You can narrow by decade and by year, and eventually you can narrow by 1975, which we will get online pretty soon. But there are a lot of ways that you can interact with the materials that help with narrowing down. Now, when you are looking for materials that are local, besides the Allen American that are nearby, I always want to mention this. We have the North Texas Daily, the Denton Record Chronicle. We have a lot of Denton County materials as well as Collin County materials. And then we have multiple county newspaper collections, the Colony Area Newspaper Collection, the McKinney Examiner collections, and then also multiple statewide collections, but I want to mention this KXAS NBC5 news collection. If you want to find a story that you see in the newspaper and find the coordinating story in video, you can often very easily find that in the KXAS collection, and you just narrow down by collection. If you're conducting family history research, and I'll show you an example in just a moment of that, Stirpes. Has anybody heard of Stirpes before? Do we have any genealogists? We probably have a genealogist. It's a very rich resource. That is a publication by the State Genealogical Society. And you will, if you have any family history that occurred in Texas, you will find something about your relatives there. And you conduct your search across the Portal Texas history, again in quotation marks, so first name, last name, just put them into quotation marks and you will find them across all of the collections that are available in the Portal Texas history. Now, this is an example of family history. I mentioned my mom's side of the family is a family from Pennsylvania, and my dad's side, my dad's direct side is from Iowa, but I do have a great-great-grandfather who traveled through Galveston at the same time his brother traveled through Galveston, my great-great-uncle, while my great-great-grandfather traveled through Ellis Island. And I have found them on the Portal Texas history by tying together in different searches. So this was Mr. Friedrich Kramer, F.E. Kramer is what he went by. And he went through Galveston. I was able to find lost letters, which were published in the newspaper, records of lost letters coming through the post office, starting around the 1850s, going up to about the 1930s, notices. And in Galveston, my great-great-uncle had gone through and left some letters at the post office, and I was able to track the Galveston post office and then the route he went coming through, following on the newspapers, to see that he wound up in El Paso. Now, when he got to El Paso, he got into some businesses. He wound up opening a barbershop, or a men's baths. I don't think it was Manny and Petty's. I think it was more shave and a haircut, but who knows? Hard to say. But I did find him there, that he was running a bath. And I used the city director of El Paso to locate a little more information about him. Going in, because of multiple days, I was able to go through the years and discover that this gentleman actually owned a hotel. And I found then, and I didn't expect this, honestly, I really didn't expect any of this, a Kramer in Texas, because it used to be, we thought our name was very unique in Texas. Kramer with an H is the joke in my family, but finding that picture of the hotel, the Kramer Hotel, and stories in the newspaper about the hotel between when it was opened or in the early 1900s and when it closed around 1927, it seemed like it was more of just kind of more like a B&B than a hotel, very informal boarding house type of place. But I never expected this. Now, we are always adding materials to the Portal of Texas history, so when I first began this search, all I could find about it, about F.E. Kramer and that side of my family, those cousins, were in the El Paso city directories. And then later on, because we have so many partners from across the state, the El Paso Public Library had added this photograph. And it was just an amazing find, because honestly, I never expected to find any, tangentially related family history photographs from that era and that time period on the Portal of Texas history. Now, I mentioned Oklahoma and Chronicling America. If you ever want to work with those, you can just type into Google Chronicling America and you will find the Library of Congress's database. They have just over 22 million newspaper pages. So see, they're doing great. We're at over 11 million, they're at 22 million. We're catching up slowly but surely. But they're adding on more too. They recently just broke the barrier, I believe, was it 1713, Sarah Lynn? Is that the right date? I think it was New Hampshire that just added a 1713 newspaper. The 1713 might not be exact, but it was New Hampshire, and that was the newest early newspaper just this year. And it is all 50 states, the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. And then we also run the Gateway to Oklahoma history, and you can, again, you can either visit the portal Texas History and scroll to the bottom to find the Gateway to Oklahoma history link, or you can just type in Gateway to Oklahoma history in Google or any search engine, and you'll find it. It functions in exactly the same way as the portal Texas history, and it contains just over 5 million newspaper pages of Oklahoma newspapers. We are running that out of UNT Libraries in partnership with the Oklahoma Historical Society. So if you have any family history questions or events that you want to research related to Oklahoma history, you should use that. But also, we are in North Texas. If you have any family history events that happened along the state line in North Texas, anywhere along that Red River, you might want to use the Gateway to Oklahoma history. I got a call from a woman about 3 months ago asking about her great-grandfather who'd been born in Texas. And I said, where was he born? And she told me, and I said, really? Because when she told me the date and she told me where, he was actually born in Oklahoma. He was born in Oslo, Oklahoma, or Oslo, Texas, and then it was in Oklahoma City at that point, and it moved back and forth across the state line. And she said she had no idea. I said, he was not born in Texas, but he was born in the same city that you thought he was born in. And she said she didn't realize it at all. She had no idea he was born in Oklahoma. And I said, well, it often happens. So if you have any family along the state line between Oklahoma and Texas, you just may find them in the Gateway to Oklahoma history instead of on the portal Texas history. Anytime anybody asks me a question that's that close to the Red River, I think, I'll just check in Texas, and if I don't find it, I'll look in Oklahoma. Inevitably, I was able to find somebody else's crazy cousin Morgan from 1908, or drunk cousin Morgan, who disappeared. And they said, well, he was somewhere in North Texas, and he just disappeared there. And we found him in Oklahoma, living along the state line of Arkansas and Oklahoma, actually. And then if you have any questions for materials, whether they're newspapers or any other primary source objects from any of the other 50 states that are individual repositories, this state memory listing, I recommend you take a picture of, be sure to take with you, because it is very useful for research. It is a comprehensive database run by the Library of Congress, just constantly updated of state projects. These are not necessarily as big as the Portal Texas History. It might be a state museum or a local museum, a county museum that runs some kind of a digital interface. Very, very useful for finding research if you need one specific relative or one specific historical event that took place somewhere that isn't Texas or Oklahoma or in a newspaper. Now, the secret of newspaper preservation is that so many people do so much work at all levels, and there are so many people to thank for all their hard work in preserving the Allen American collection. Without these people, this work would not get done. Preservation is a community effort, and it's something that I'm always in awe of, how much work community members put into this. The people I got to work with, Deborah Arledge, and Jeannie Fisher, having the luxury of having you two here to get this started, who recognize the value, and you knew who to call. Being able to have you on the ground, knowing what to do. And Tom, of course, Tom Keener and Claudia Wayland, both of you, I feel like we held each other's hands the whole step of the way to get the grant funding, get everything online. And we are still adding more materials constantly. And there will be much more Allen American coming up soon. And Sarah Lynn Fisher, whose enthusiasm and passion for this project I think, really kept us all going in a lot of ways, too. We always have so much fun being able to talk to her about something we find, or tease her about things we find in the newspaper. Her birth announcement was very adorable. That was fun to share on our small work channel. But all the work that everybody puts in and all the researchers are what make, I think, our jobs a lot of fun and worthwhile, but also are what preserve history. So thank you so much for inviting me. And if you have any questions, let me know. And you are welcome to email or call me.
Carmen, that was wonderful. I'm going to ask the first question. I know in my own research with African Americans, they often escape the census because, for whatever reason, or the death records. Can you give just a few pointers that you would advise black people who are interested in researching their history, just a few little pointers to use?
Sure. All the newspapers function the same way on the portal, Texas History. So always check, because we're constantly adding new collections. We're preparing to add early issues of the Dallas Express, which was the African American newspaper in Dallas for multiple decades. We'll be adding the years that are publishing in public domain first, and then we're seeking permission eventually to add those copyrighted newspapers later on. Also, we have the Houston Informer from Houston, obviously, as well as the Tyler Leader. There are multiple African American newspaper databases where you can find newspaper titles. And then there's also, for earlier on, there is a runaway slave project that is trying to index the people who weren't documented as having last names, who are documented by characteristics, based on runaway slave ads posted about them. And the ads are very descriptive, and people have been able to track down these people's lives and follow them through the states, often south to north, using this database. And that's something that's very handy as well for genealogical research for African Americans.
Questions, comments, protests? This is your chance to ask one of the great experts of our time. Deborah, okay. Deborah gets a lot to ask many questions as she wants.
My question is about the Dallas newspapers. They're not on the portal, I don't think. But one time, I'm one of those 29,000 people that have been on there probably 1,000 times. One time I was on there, and I did find some Dallas newspapers in searching. I don't remember if it was Abilene or some town out in West Texas, and I was shocked, but I haven't been able to go back and find can you tell us how to access the Dallas papers what few are there?
All right. So I know exactly what happened in your search. The Abilene Library Consortium called us one day, and we have X number of dollars, and it was a lot, to spend, and we need to find a project to fund. Do you have anything that's waiting to be digitized that we could give you money to do? And I said, I do. I have 1,000 newspaper reels of all kinds of titles, and that included early Dallas titles. Dallas Morning News, I believe, might have been part of it, very early, all public domain. So it would have been labeled with Abilene Library Consortium because they funded the project. But you'll also find Brenham newspapers in that collection, Galveston newspapers, probably some El Paso newspapers. But when you go on the portal, if you use the filters, when you browse the newspaper collection, if you use the filters on the left to browse by specific area, you can browse by Dallas County. And I always recommend that for if you're looking specifically for Dallas newspapers. We have a lot of Dallas area newspapers. As I mentioned, the Colony Courier, we're working on the Collin County, McKinney. Dallas Morning News has their newspapers on Newsbank. They have a license with Newsbank, and it is a paid subscription service. So until or unless everything goes public domain in 94 years, which I know where I will be at that point, or if they give permission, they probably won't ever, Dallas Morning News won't be on the portal Texas History, but other Dallas items will be. And we will continue to add more Dallas as the dates get into the public domain.
Is the Dallas Herald on it?
Some of it is, yes. Dallas Morning News bought the Dallas Herald, and they own the rights to it, but the public domain, a significant portion of public domain, issues are available on the portal.
Questions, comments? This is Mary Foster. She's our, tell them what you do.
Sorry, yes. I'm Mary Foster. I'm with the City of Allen, but I'm more recently the Heritage and Cultural Arts Program Manager for the Heritage Village. So I'm working very closely with the Heritage Guild and their documentation of Allen and their contributions to the portal. I'm in awe. I come from East Texas, came from a very small town, and I'm going to be encouraging them to send their newspaper.
Which town?
I was born and raised in Big Sandy.
Okay.
Graduated from Tyler. They've got some of their documents on there. I'm a very recent user of the portal for some history research that I'm doing for programming. I'm looking up home economics, and I was absolutely amazed that it took me directly to every single issue in Allen American, all the way back to 1972, where it was talking about home economic classes and clubs. It was absolutely incredible. So I wanted to say thank you. And we're also working on a story map for the Heritage Village, and we were looking at the map overlays for the area as it grew. Are you finding it difficult? There was a period of time where as cities grew, the information was lost, or somebody took it home, or it was burned, or it got water damaged. Are you finding neighboring counties that are filling in the blanks, or is there's just holes in some of the information that's not going to be recovered?
We do neighboring counties, which is why I mentioned actually a lot of Denton County materials. Neighboring counties are very helpful in filling in the blanks. I actually obtained, there was a weird dispute that happened in Denton County long before I was living in Denton back in the mid-2000s, where the Historical Commission broke up its materials, and some went to Collin County and some stayed in Denton. And the group who wound up with it in Collin County wound up donating it back to us and was kind enough to let us digitize it. But there is a lot of nice communal support I've noticed. So if you are looking for something and you don't find it on the portal but you're not sure, feel free to write to me, and I can reach out to other people who might be in the know about where that is. I've had one or two newspaper issues that I have questions about where I've reached out to somebody, a librarian in often in Collin County, who can say, oh, I have that, I can help you with that. Or I can tell you who has it, who's sitting on that newspaper issue. It's often just by accident, but serendipity really. But yeah.
Okay, I like these questions. Gives me my exercise.
I really like your tie. I actually have 3 questions, but I promise I'll be quick. And thank you to you and everyone in this room who does what you do, because I'm just like a family historian and I rely on all of what y'all work on, so thank you so much. You kind of touched on it, but I was wondering, like, I pay for newspapers.com because I thought that's where I needed to go look at newspaper things because I'm just not educated on this topic. So what is the difference between paying for, like, this newspapers.com thing that I have versus what you all do? And you said some of the places, like the Dallas Morning News, is not publicly available, but can you just talk about that for a moment?
Yes, I can. The newspapers.com repository is much larger, and it is, I know it's all 50 states combined with the Ancestry census records as well with those materials. There is value in the newspapers.com. I mentioned my family, my direct ancestors are from Iowa and Pennsylvania, so I've had to use newspapers.com. I can use Chronicling America to some extent, to locate them, but to really tie them together with the census records and then with some of the ship manifests. That's where the ship logs, I'm able to find them on newspapers.com and Ancestry. They function search-wise very similarly to the Portal of Texas History, so you won't feel completely strange working on the Portal of Texas History from newspapers. The Portal of Texas History is mostly Texas, but as you saw, the National Intelligencer, we have some Washington, D.C., we have some Mexico because we were a part of Mexico. And then also we have something from all over the world called the Battleship Texas newspaper that was on a ship that sailed around the world, so it's recorded on multiple countries. So it's a different context. So I don't want to say, oh, newspapers.com boo, because it's not true. Actually, they're very generous partners, and we've worked with them multiple times. You will find a lot of the newspapers from Chronicling America on newspapers.com, but you won't find all of them. It's a different context, and it just really depends on where your family members are from. Feel free to email me too, and I can give you recommendations. For me, where my direct family was from, it's often easier as a one-stop shop. So.
And then you, I promise I'll be quick, but you said that you are welcoming contributions from people who have old newspapers. So is that only if someone has like a full issue or if they have clippings? Like, what is your point of view on that if people have, kind of just clippings?
Just get a hold of me.
Okay.
Yeah, write to
Okay.
me. Because, we can help with something.
Okay.
There's
perfect.
something we can do.
And then lastly, this is very self-serving, but since you guys digitize records all the time, if you were talking to a family historian, is there a best practice for like, I just bring my stuff and scan it and then I have it digitally in my Google Drive? Is that like your worst nightmare? Like what, is there something you would just suggest to someone who is digitizing their own things for their own, does it hurt it if you scan it because the light is hurting the page? I just was wondering what your point of view was.
You can't hurt it scanning it. I would say always track a good citation with what you find and be very deliberate about your file naming so that it's well organized. So for instance, on the F.E. Kramer materials that I showed you, I named F.E. Kramer El Paso City Directory and then the date, 1909, just to be able to track where I was. And on the Portal Texas History, everything that you print from there directly, if I were to print this picture on a printer, it would print with a citation, or I could save it as a PDF and it would also print with a citation. So that's really helpful. But we have other genealogists here who might have other ideas. Any suggestions?
Suggestions?
For maintaining a digital library of your genealogy research? Feel free to email.
Questions? Well, this is our youngest guest. He asked if this is going to be online, and the answer is yes. It actually is online even as we speak. But we're also recording it to put it on YouTube at a later time. It'll be about 2 weeks, though, with the holiday and so forth. It'll be about 2 weeks. And you are our youngest guest, so I'm going to give you a special award. A big smile.
Thank you. When did the newspaper start?
The Allen American?
Yes.
1970 was when it started, which was, let's see, how many years ago was that? 54 years ago.
Does the Portal of Texas History have any grant opportunities available for if the Heritage Guild had small collections of other materials that aren't newspapers?
What a wonderful question. Very soon, or actually right now, in fact, feel free to email me if you do have a small collection that's not newspapers. We offer the Rescuing Texas History Grant Awards, and these are small work-in-kind awards of $1,000 worth of work done on a collection to digitize materials that individuals or small groups may own. One person can submit their own personal collection. The guild could submit a guild collection. Anybody may submit and prepare their materials, and please don't hesitate to email me if you have questions about that, and I will get you information about the grant application and about what that entails. Those are due at the beginning of August. These are very, very easy to write. The biggest challenge is that we just need an inventory of your collection.
Okay, questions, comments, protest? Now, this is the nightmare of all genealogists, but spelling of names. Here in Allen, we had a family here named Wetzel. 3 brothers spelled their name differently. Brothers. W-E-T-S-E-L, W-E-T-Z-E-L, and W-E-T-S-A-U-L. So can you give some tips on how to play with different spellings of names?
If you know the first name, use the first name and every variant, in quotation marks, one variant at a time, and just test that out. And make sure you include the first name with the variant of the spelling. That will get you completely different results, but they should all be relevant to what you need, but just one variant at a time of spelling. The city of Fayetteville, spelled its name 3 different ways over 3 decades. Yeah.
Questions, comments? She's one of the top experts in the United States, so take advantage of it while you're here, because otherwise you got to pay. Questions, comments, protests? Comments, suggestions, challenges you've had in your own research? This is like the auction house, going, gone. Dr. Anna Cromer, thank you so much.
And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And Tom, thank you.